Hi there, this is Angelus and welcome back to my channel. In this short video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about two concepts or two types of sciences. Now, if you've seen some other videos on NLP, Neuro-linguistic programming, you kind of understand what I'm going to be talking about. If you haven't, that's okay. If you're new to all this, I'm going to explain it and give you a crash course introduction to all of it. The other science that I've been studying for the last few decades is epigenetics. Epigenetics is relatively new, but it isn't new. Now, if you like this video at the end, hit subscribe and hit the bell so you are reminded of new videos that I produce in the future. So remember to see this video from the beginning to the end so you can get all the nuances in between. What is this video all about? Epigenetics and NLP. Well, epigenetics is a science of experimentation over the years on how and why genes turn on and off, the way the genes work in our bodies, and the relationship they do have to our thoughts, believe it or not. And, this is not a new concept. Like I said, even the mystics have gone back thousands of years saying of what is in our thoughts, what are in our minds actually affect our bodies. Well, they didn't know about genes back then, but we have the science in the last century to talk about and validate what the ancient mystics knew about how the body affected by the mind and by what feelings in our heart. And yes, and I have to make this clear. The feelings in your heart, the connection between the heart and the memory of the heart and the processing power of the brain is vital to this. You can't separate them. They're needed to make this work. What is this? Well, we talk about genes, and people, specifically doctors, have said genes are something you're born with. Duh, you have them. Everybody has them. But more specifically, predisposition or propensity towards a specific skill set, a specific ability, an enhancement. Maybe you're a great mathematician. You're great at memorizing names and numbers. Maybe you're just good at history. Maybe you're even excellent as an athlete. You're a master of something, okay? This is predetermined by what the experts say is genes. So, but the opposite is true. You might have an illness. You might have some kind of predisposition towards baldness, maybe arthritis. They'll tell you if you've taken a gene mapping of your specific chemistry. They might say, well, you're prone to this type of cancer, this type of diabetes, and the list goes on all the negatives. Well, this is what they have found over the decades, that even though that may be the facts, that may be true, that you have a precursor, so to speak, on a genetic level on how you create things, maneuver things, take a job, go to school, pick hobbies. And perhaps the way you master all these new skill sets may be determined by your genetic predisposition. Well, the truth of the matter is that's true and not true. For instance, a person can have a predisposition towards, say, memorizing names. They might have difficulty memorizing names. They may not be able to remember names long term. It may be short term, but that's about it. Now, some people have dyslexia like myself. And what it means is when we read words on a page, we tend to see them differently than you. So if you're not told you have dyslexia, you can easily think something's wrong with your brain or something's wrong with you because you have trouble associating certain texts, certain words. If you're going to be on a computer and you're going to be dealing, typing information or dealing with data entry of any kind, and you're not told about this predisposition of dyslexia, it's a genetic thing, well, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And I did have a lot of problems until I realized what the problem was. They told me again, this is a genetic thing you're born with, it's on, can't do nothing about it. So what I did was I worked with developing my skill sets to countermand and make corrections for me so I can read in front of people. I couldn't even public speak before. Now I could do this and nobody can tell that I'm having an issue. I was even able to marry my brother and his wife, and reading the marital rules and rituals on my book was difficult. But these new skill sets I learned, I was able to go through them, and nobody was the wiser of my so-called disability, as they describe it. It's not a disability if you can overcome it. So then the disability is actually lack of knowledge. Then I was introduced to epigenetics. And epigenetics, I've studied many of the experiments on it. I've gone on YouTube, studied books. It's a fascinating medium of science. What it basically is it's a method to switch on and switch off your genetic blueprint. You can actually hack into your genetic blueprint and change it. Meaning, you turn on a gene and that stays on, then whatever that gene is for, let's just say better memorization, better navigational, if you're a pilot or drive a lot, it helps you to do better at math, do better at remembering names, do better at whatever, fill in the blank. If you turn on that gene, then it becomes easy for you to do whatever it is that gene was meant to be working through your biological and psychological avatar. So the gene can be turned on consciously. We can hack into our own genetic makeup and manipulate it. No, not with chemicals. No, not with surgery or anything like that. Literally by using our mind and our thoughts. The experiments have shown in the past, in fact, there was one experiment of a nun who was putting together this weekend event for elderly nursing home vets. And what she did was, knowing that many of them had canes and many of them had trouble walking and they were slow and what you expect at an advanced age, she decorated a hall and made it look like, it was a motel, made it look like something from the past, their past, like decades when they were young, in their 30s and 20s. And she'll put magazines, she'll pipe in music from that time, and she made it look like it was time in their past. And she would entertain them and bring them there to do exercises and community events and things to get their minds going. It was amazing that after a couple of days spending that kind of time in that kind of environment, like they're going back in their times, that they started acting physically younger. Some that had come in with canes didn't need the canes anymore. Some actually started to reminisce of those days when they really forgotten a lot of what happened in those days. If you told them before this experiment, they didn't know, well, I remember being this and that, but not the specifics. Now they were talking as if they were reliving their past, which they were in many ways. So when they were examined psychologically, physically, they had all the trademarks of somebody many years younger than what they were. Some of them by 10, 15, 20 years. It's like after a few days of this exposure to being in their past, artificially though, they came out like a fountain of youth. It was like a discovery, like they reversed their aging to some degree, mentally and physically. So that's just one experiment. That was back in the 70s. Many experiments since then have shown that when you focus on something, when you're emotionally attached to that something, it would affect how genes operate in your DNA, literally, turning on or off. If it's a gene that turns on, let's say a specific gene that affects aging, it could be turned off temporarily or turned on. The reverse is true. When people have been exposed to something that's traumatic, that's something that makes them sad, makes them anxious, makes them frustrated, it seems to turn on the genes that accelerate aging process. And we know what happens when you age. You have trouble focusing, there's physical pain, the list goes on. So what I've done, and I've seen through other people's, my mentors have taught me, to use NLP to get people to a mental state, an emotional mental state, where they can see and visualize themselves in what is known as the happy place, as you've heard in hypnosis, where really it's just creating a space, a bubble in their mind somewhere. So they don't have to physically go somewhere to hear music and be somewhere and read old magazines and, do everything physically. They can actually do this in their mind through NLP within minutes, because the mind doesn't know the difference between a fantasy, illusion, and reality. And all the science has shown, once you took them back with NLP, or whenever I did it with my clients, and took them to a point in their life that they were vibrant, they were young, they were healthy, everything worked for them, even if they have suffered from certain, predispositions, genetic dispositions like dyslexia, you can actually reverse the way they respond. Actually, people like myself were able to, instead of using skill sets to mask my dyslexia, I was able to put myself in that altered state of reality, believing that and feeling that I was okay. I didn't have dyslexia, that was an illusion. And believe it or not, I'm able to read normally after coming out of these sessions. And so I started doing these sessions with my clients and my students. And again, getting the same results. And then when we would test them later on, it stuck. It's like the gene stayed on once it was activated. The people who had certain fears, certain predispositions, physical problems, illness, mental lack of focus, whatever the issue was, we were able to reverse it, shut off the gene and turn on the good gene, because genes, they're really basically on and off. They don't tell you that you are going to be something. They just turn on a specific characteristic, a specific trait, a specific protein in your body, whatever it is that affects you. It's just an on and off switch. So through NLP, we were successful to help people shut off certain genes that were not helping them and turn on other genes. So what are you saying? So you can hack into your genes through NLP? Yes. And not only that, the hacking is the easiest thing in the world. It does take a little focus and it takes a little practice, just like bodybuilding or running a marathon. You got to work into it. But the great thing is, if you do little exercises every day, 2 or 3 times a day, or as often as possible, but minimum 2 or 3 times a day, you'll see results within a few days to a few weeks. And that's it. And the results are permanent, because once the brain is a perfect device when it comes to taking a habit and making it permanent. It literally, the science has shown, neuroscientists I've spoke to have shown me videos where once you start focusing on a thought, keep focusing on that thought, it starts to immediately make physical connections in the brain. The neurons are actually growing and creating new networks to validate that thought. And at some point, you don't have to consciously think of that thought. Physical circuitry in the brain is so fixed and permanent that it now takes over for you. So it's a physiological process, a chemical process, and it all can be manipulated through NLP, hypnosis, self-hypnosis, or guided hypnosis. And once it does that, it hotwires your genetic makeup, literally in days and weeks. If you're interested in hacking your own genetic makeup, give me a call, DM me, and let me know how I can assist you. I could point you to the right direction, or I can show you how myself, and maybe even make a few more additional videos on NLP if this helps you. So if you like this video, again, subscribe, hit the bell so you're reminded of other videos that are coming, and share this with other people and let me know how it's helped you. Everybody, have a wonderful day. I'll see you in my next video.